Senator Kennedy's single inquiry regarding embezzled funds rendered Ilhan Omar completely mute. I have observed hundreds of legislative sessions over 3 decades, including financial, legal, and security briefings that completely bypass nightly television broadcasts. The vast majority of these spectacles amount to mere dramatic performances. Legislative aides quietly exchange written messages. Elected officials simply recite inquiries drafted by completely different individuals. This creates ambient chatter within a metropolis fundamentally constructed upon ambient chatter. This particular gathering stood out as remarkably unique. An investigative panel in Minnesota requested Congresswoman Ilhan Omar to speak regarding a national food assistance controversy within her jurisdiction. She outright declined the invitation. The investigators established a firm cutoff date for submitting related paperwork. She completely failed to meet that requirement. The officials subsequently attempted to legally compel her appearance. Partisan allies on the board successfully obstructed that specific maneuver. A television journalist intercepted her within the legislative corridors and questioned her potential willingness to participate. She strolled directly past the recording equipment while maintaining absolute silence. Following 3 separate requests and 3 corresponding dismissals, Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana dispatched a formal correspondence. She truly ought to have ignored that one as well. Omar refused to pause for a single prompt. She also ignored the ceremonial start of the proceedings. Prior to Kennedy concluding his initial remark, she aggressively interrupted his statement. She declared this inquiry a partisan persecution aimed squarely at the Somali demographic. She claimed it singles out migrant households arriving in this nation seeking improved circumstances. Furthermore, she vowed never to remain seated while legislative peers exploit starving adolescents to advance a prejudiced narrative. She aimed that specific accusation directly at the American public. Consider the profound implications of that statement. Citizens simply desire to understand the destination of their hard-earned revenue. Taxpayers sought answers regarding how a national adolescent meal initiative transformed into an illegal syndicate, yet she labeled this curiosity a malicious crusade. She characterized legitimate financial inquiries as blatant religious bigotry. She gazed directly into a broadcast lens inside a taxpayer-funded facility and insisted that questioning embezzled public funds renders one intolerant. Keep that firmly in mind, considering John Kennedy definitely kept it in mind. He offered absolutely no immediate verbal reply. He quickly jotted a brief note along the edge of his paper. The very edge of his lips shifted upward by a fraction. It lacked the warmth of a grin but strongly resembled pure acknowledgement. It mirrored the expression of an individual witnessing someone fulfill a highly anticipated prediction. This represents the crucial element everyone must comprehend regarding John Kennedy. Whenever he falls completely silent, he is certainly not facing defeat. He is absolutely never experiencing any form of bewilderment. He is meticulously calculating the situation at hand. He tallies the exact number of escape routes the testifier just sealed shut voluntarily. He evaluates the precise quantity of remaining avenues for evasion. Once those available options dwindle sufficiently, he finally initiates his verbal offensive. He politely thanked the representative for her attendance at the session. He promised to present a handful of basic inquiries before allowing her to resume her normal schedule. Uncomplicated was the exact term he deliberately selected. That specific adjective carried tremendous intentional weight. Anyone who has witnessed this gentleman cross-examine legal appointees or dismantle high-ranking officials using merely a Southern accent and elementary logic understands the true definition of that specific word. It signifies that a particular individual is nearing the most agonizing professional experience of their lifetime. He asked if she personally drafted the legislative measure identified as the Meals Act. He prompted her to verify the accuracy of his statement. The Congresswoman acknowledged the factual assertion. He then highlighted how this specific mandate uniquely permitted commercial eateries to join the National Youth Sustenance Initiative. He again requested verbal confirmation of this historical change. She quickly noted that the measure achieved approval across both sides of the political aisle. She added that former President Trump ultimately formalized the legislation.
He smoothly acknowledged her contextual additions. He subsequently pointed out that this identical rule authorized takeout food operations, effectively eliminating any physical confirmation regarding the actual existence of the benefiting youngsters. He pressed her to validate this crucial operational detail. The representative paused visibly before answering. The delay lasted merely a fraction of a moment. She subsequently admitted the statement was accurate. It is imperative to fully grasp the significance of that exchange. He delivered a trio of binary inquiries requiring simple affirmation or denial. He launched absolutely zero direct allegations. The execution involved zero dramatic flair and completely lacked elevated volume. Yet within 1 minute, the senator successfully solidified 3 sworn truths on the official record. She personally authored the underlying statute. This legislation dismantled protective protocols, allowing food distribution for minors possessing no verifiable identity. A basic affirmative or negative response rarely ruins a professional reputation instantly. However, she had already sustained severe rhetorical damage without consciously realizing the danger. This detail illustrates the core misunderstanding surrounding this specific senator's strategic approach. He routinely avoids initiating an interrogation with the most explosive revelation. He fundamentally refuses to commence his questioning with a direct indictment. He establishes verifiable truths that the subject must admit, since contradicting them constitutes easily disproven perjury. Every affirmative response functions as a foundational building block. Once the target notices they are trapped atop a structure of his design, escaping safely becomes utterly impossible. I have personally witnessed him execute this precise maneuver against numerous testifiers throughout recent history. Intelligent individuals identify the trap by the third query and begin delivering highly qualified responses. Those failing to spot the tactic continue agreeing straight until their entire foundation completely vanishes. The lawmaker accessed a file and extracted one solitary physical document. It consisted of merely a single leaf. He positioned it directly upon the desk dividing them, flattening it gently with his hand. He politely inquired if the representative could identify the provided material. She claimed an inability to decipher the text from her current seated position. He clarified that the paper represented a food list from a Minneapolis dining establishment known as the Safari Restaurant. He questioned her personal knowledge regarding that specific commercial enterprise. She defensively asserted her awareness of numerous culinary venues located across her electoral zone. He confidently validated her broad geographic familiarity. He revealed that this exact location invoiced national authorities for $12 million via the Feeding Our Future initiative. That staggering sum allegedly covered youth provisions stemming from just one standalone eatery. He allowed the sheer magnitude of that figure to resonate heavily throughout the chamber. He then pointed out that her victory festivity occurred at this very venue during the previous cycle. He requested explicit confirmation of this historical scheduling detail. The representative visibly adjusted her posture within her seat. She insisted that her gatherings have taken place at countless venues across her territory over time. Organizing a political function at an eatery hardly suggests intimate awareness of their underlying corporate operations. The senator leaned his head slightly to one side. He questioned whether she found it remarkably odd that the most massive illicit operation in this scandal perfectly aligned with her chosen celebration location. She defensively replied that random overlapping events frequently occur. He readily agreed with her basic premise regarding chance occurrences. He emphasized his agreement with undeniable certainty. However, he noted that whenever random events continually accumulate involving identical individuals within a specific geographical area, they rapidly transform into compelling proof. The lawmaker completely failed to offer a verbal counterargument. She intentionally allowed his damning assertion to remain unchallenged. This silence represented her subsequent major tactical error. Her initial blunder involved appearing at the hearing whatsoever. The senator offered a small nod while scribbling down an observation. He allowed the heavy silence to linger, much like an obvious blemish resting upon pristine linen. Every single person present could clearly observe the reality. Zero physical gesturing is required to draw attention toward it. He subsequently spoke in a hushed, remarkably soft tone. It mirrored the distinctive cadence a Southern gentleman employs right before delivering incredibly painful information. He quietly repeated the $12 million figure to the representative. He asked if she comprehended the immense purchasing power of that specific amount. He explained it equals educational nourishment for every single minor in her territory over a completely uninterrupted 24-month span. This means providing daily heated provisions for absolutely any famished student arriving at a Minneapolis campus. Yet an individual associated with that eatery purchased a luxury sports vehicle using those exact funds. Another person acquired expensive real estate holdings. A different associate electronically transferred massive sums to foreign accounts. Meanwhile, the vulnerable youth your legislation supposedly shielded remained starved as grown individuals deposited payments featuring fraudulent adolescent identities. He placed the physical dining list aside without ever handling it afterward. The document remained resting upon the surface throughout the entire remainder of the session. The single sheet lay perfectly flat with the text fully visible. You must absolutely retain the memory of that specific document. Its crucial significance becomes apparent further along in the narrative. Any viewer who has prepared food for a descendant due to inadequate campus provisions inherently comprehends the emotional weight of that financial sum. $12 million is an incredibly vast amount. This all funneled through merely one culinary establishment. Follow this platform immediately since mainstream broadcasting corporations deliberately concealed the subsequent unfolding events. The senator then grasped a significantly denser stack of paperwork. He angled the file so both the congresswoman and her legal team could easily view the front leaf. He announced possession of official evidentiary displays originating from the national litigation against Amy Bach. This woman operated as the creator and primary leader overseeing Feeding Our Future. Authorities found her guilty across numerous national charges, resulting in a formidable 4-decade incarceration term handed down just weeks prior. 41 years represents an incredibly severe punishment. This penalty stands as the most extensive viral-era swindling conviction documented across national legal records. He proceeded to unseal the thick folder. He declared that the files contained electronic messages linking her legislative personnel directly to criminals currently found guilty of nationwide racketeering. He requested permission to vocalize specific selections for the official stenographer. He recited highly exact calendar days. He stated actual identifiable human identities. He vocalized message headings seamlessly linking individuals within her employment sphere directly to convicts currently occupying maximum security holding facilities. He completely avoided rushing the devastating presentation. He articulated every single piece of correspondence with deliberate slowness. He provided the politician ample opportunity to offer a rebuttal following each individual disclosure. She utilized those pauses to converse quietly with her attorney and examine her desk materials, actively avoiding any direct acknowledgement of the damning evidence placed on the record. Let me explain a crucial psychological dynamic regarding quiet moments during legislative inquiries. A pause following an inquiry generally represents nothing more than standard conversational gaps. This exceedingly mundane occurrence happens frequently. Testifiers routinely ponder their statements before vocalizing them aloud. Lawmakers constantly rearrange their physical documents. Absolutely no one pays attention to such normal delays. However, an extended pause following hard proof feels entirely distinct. A lack of noise after a factual presentation symbolizes an entire audience collectively recognizing that the respondent possesses zero adequate defense, and every attendee feels that profound realization. She quickly claimed her team handles thousands of community messages during any given monthly cycle. Replying to digital inquiries from local voters remains standard operating procedure for lawmakers. She insisted such administrative tasks completely failed to prove involvement in illicit endeavors. He pleasantly voiced complete agreement with her fundamental procedural assertion. Simply answering a digital letter certainly falls short of illegal behavior. However, these specific messages did not originate from citizens complaining about minor municipal road damages. These represented direct dialogues with operators who systematically embezzled national resources allocated exclusively for youth sustenance. Furthermore, the primary mastermind of the syndicate legally testified that you were, citing the exact court transcript, probably cognizant of the financial discrepancies within the initiative. She argued the syndicate leader is merely a guilty criminal desperately seeking a lighter punishment from prosecutors. She demanded that the criminal's sworn statements be treated as completely unreliable. He calmly reminded her of the massive 4-decade penalty. He politely suggested that the convicted woman currently lacks any realistic bargaining power whatsoever. The collective reaction manifested audibly across the chamber. It lacked clapping or dramatic breaths, sounding more like bodies shifting deeply into furniture and mobile devices retreating into pockets, since digital distractions suddenly paled compared to the immediate physical drama unfolding nearby. 3 different administrative aides supporting the politicians ceased their note-taking completely. A single staff member maintained a fixed gaze upon the illuminated departure notice above the threshold. Subsequently, the representative executed a maneuver that nearly succeeded. I state that observation with absolute sincerity. Countless defensive pivots have unfolded before my eyes during investigative sessions. The vast majority radiate pure, unadulterated panic. A large percentage appear incredibly transparent and clumsy. Her specific countermeasure felt remarkably authentic. For approximately a quarter of a minute, she commanded total authority over the space. Her posture immediately straightened into rigid attention. She locked her gaze fearlessly onto the interrogating senator. Then she unleashed the most powerful rhetorical sequence of her grueling session. She forcefully insisted on establishing a crystal-clear narrative for the committee. She reminded everyone that former President Donald Trump officially authorized the statute containing her specific language. The agricultural chief appointed by Trump personally designed the administrative blueprints governing the initiative's actual field execution. His specific executive branch comprehensively managed the initial deployment of the entire operational structure. She boldly suggested that true seekers of responsibility must interrogate the commander who approved the mandate and the bureaucrats he tasked with managing it. Speaking with complete candor, that specific argument hit its mark effectively. The former leader indeed formally authorized the initial pandemic relief package. His agricultural department truly drafted the operational guidelines. His team absolutely supervised the foundational stages of the massive initiative. Her statements completely lacked deceptive framing. She presented undeniable historical truths. If the senator lacked an adequate rebuttal, the entire interrogation effectively concluded right there. She recognized this reality with absolute clarity. The liberal representatives present fully understood the shifting momentum as well. 2 particular aides physically shifted forward, resembling predators sensing vulnerability within their immediate vicinity. The lawmakers slowly inhaled a deep draft of air. A profound quiet gripped the room for roughly 2 moments. It remained far too brief to signify genuine uncertainty. It lasted just long enough to represent a calculated tactical choice. He graciously conceded the basic validity of her defensive argument. He acknowledged the former executive finalized the legislation. He agreed that the previous White House operated the distribution network. He firmly validated her historical timeline as completely correct. Subsequently, his vocal tone deepened considerably. The volume remained steady, but the pacing decelerated dramatically. However, he noted the chief executive completely avoided hosting a victory bash at that specific corrupt diner. The commander-in-chief entirely refrained from swapping digital correspondence with the lead fraudster. Furthermore, the executive never dodged a formal request from a regional investigative board demanding an explanatory appearance. Another brief moment of absolute stillness materialized. A specialized regional panel officially requested your presence to clarify your ties regarding this massive swindle. You outright rejected the summons. Investigators offered a strict time frame for submitting necessary evidentiary paperwork. You blew past that requirement entirely. The board attempted to legally compel your sworn participation. Your political allies forcefully obstructed that binding resolution. A journalist posed a straightforward inquiry within the corridors of this very structure. You pivoted rapidly and departed without uttering a single syllable in response. He gently placed his writing instrument beside the printed food list. He reminded the politician that courts have already found numerous individuals guilty. The female mastermind overseeing the syndicate currently faces 4 decades behind bars. Your legislative draft inherently generated the loophole enabling this massive theft. You toasted your political victory inside the exact establishment depositing the largest illicit payments. Your staff traded digital messages with accused criminals currently sitting inside national penitentiaries. Yet whenever anybody demanded basic accountability, you deliberately avoided appearing, deflected responsibility onto others, or simply retreated without speaking. He briefly shifted his gaze back toward the physical paper document. He asked why a supposedly innocent representative continuously flees from basic scrutiny. Distribute this account to any citizen currently contributing to the national treasury. The public deserves a truthful accounting of their vanished financial resources. The lawmaker dragged the audio equipment nearer to her face. As she eventually responded, her vocal delivery sounded highly measured and cautious. She selected each syllable like an individual recognizing their statements would enter legislative archives and potentially influence a future courtroom panel. She agreed that prosecutors secured dozens of guilty verdicts regarding this massive swindle. She fiercely maintained her complete exclusion from that criminal group. Authorities have absolutely never leveled legal allegations against her personally. Her identity remains entirely absent from any formal prosecutorial documents. She sternly demanded an end to accusations heavily reliant on mere locational proximity. The investigator offered a deeply deliberate movement of his head. He smoothly validated her defensive technicality as entirely factual. He reiterated her unindicted status, claiming a strong desire to maintain absolute fairness regarding that specific point. He shifted his focus directly toward the printed restaurant sheet resting upon the desk. However, he pointedly asked if she recognized who else previously enjoyed a pristine legal status. Absolutely every individual associated with that corrupt eatery shared that exact trait initially. Every operator submitting fraudulent bills and every criminal depositing massive government payouts remained uncharged as well. Not a single member of that syndicate faced legal scrutiny early on. They all maintained innocence right until the exact second the indictments finally dropped. The politician extended her hand toward the audio device once more. Her mouth opened slightly in preparation to speak. Suddenly, she shoved the equipment backward across the table. She grabbed for it another time, dragging it closer to her face. Several agonizing moments elapsed while her fingers gripped the stand and her jaw hung partially slack. I observed a politician notorious for aggressively interrupting the national executive during a major primetime address sit completely paralyzed within a silent committee chamber on a random weekday, utterly incapable of forming a single coherent syllable. She shoved the audio stand away for the last attempt. She completely abandoned any further effort to utilize it. The interrogator simply bided his time. He completely lacked any sense of frantic urgency. He fundamentally operates without feeling rushed by external pressures. That specific characteristic vastly distinguishes him from nearly every peer occupying that legislative complex. Alternative politicians hastily deliver concluding remarks, constantly fearing their window of opportunity might vanish. This particular lawmaker inherently relies upon profound stillness. He fully understands that absolute quiet applies the most immense psychological pressure within any environment. Upon resuming his vocalization, his tone emerged incredibly hushed and remarkably controlled. It resembled the delivery of an individual condensing a highly contemplated, deeply analyzed philosophical conclusion. He reminded the representative that criminals plundered a staggering $250 million intended for impoverished youth. You personally drafted the underlying legislation enabling this massive heist. You enthusiastically toasted your victory inside the exact venue actively depositing the fraudulent payouts. Yet the instant investigators demanded accountability, you actively fled the situation entirely. He completely halted his vocal delivery. A single moment ticked past, a subsequent moment rapidly followed. Finally, he delivered a devastatingly brief phrase utilizing the identical Southern rhythm he normally reserves for delivering a family mealtime prayer. The impoverished youngsters truly lacked adequate nourishment. You clearly suffered no such deprivation whatsoever. The Congresswoman forcefully elevated herself from the chair. She completely refrained from elevating her vocal volume. She avoided physically striking the wooden furnishings in frustration. She failed to aggressively gesture or hurl inflammatory accusations like she enthusiastically performed during the presidential address mere months prior. She hastily collected her documents into a messy bundle, hugged them tightly against her torso, and marched toward a peripheral doorway. Her legal advisor trailed closely behind her rapid departure. Both individuals completely avoided glancing backward over their shoulders. The exit featured absolutely zero dramatic final remarks and completely lacked waiting media personnel, simply because observers assumed she would utilize the main thoroughfare. During nearly every previous contentious departure, she traditionally exits radiating intense volume, aggressive allegations, and highly confrontational posturing. Conversely, she departed this specific venue resembling an individual painfully aware that broadcasters will endlessly loop her immediate reaction throughout her remaining professional lifespan. That specific behavioral shift serves as the ultimate indicator of total defeat. Whenever this fiery politician lacks the ammunition to yell, she inherently possesses absolutely zero remaining defensive options. Please follow this digital broadcast platform immediately. Each passing cycle features a monumental investigative session that mainstream corporate media deliberately ignores entirely. The subsequent massive confrontation already occupies an official calendar slot. Dozens of operators currently face devastating criminal judgments. Criminals successfully looted $250 million from an initiative designed specifically to nourish impoverished adolescents. The primary syndicate architect absorbed a staggering 4-decade penitentiary sentence. Meanwhile, deep inside the 5th electoral zone of Minnesota, countless youngsters currently trudge toward their morning classes entirely devoid of a morning meal. This tragedy occurs despite the existence of a robust federal initiative. The initiative definitely operates, yet greedy grown-ups shamelessly pilfered the operational capital by forging youth identities on bills for provisions that remained entirely uncooked, unserved, and completely unconsumed. Elderly citizens surviving on heavily restricted budgets effectively financed this massive swindle. Military personnel returning from overseas deployments only to face crushing residential levies and medical costs completely footed the bill. Laboring parents forcibly surrendering massive chunks of their wages to the national treasury annually bankrolled this entire operation. Those exact tax revenues were originally destined to materialize as cafeteria plates, dairy containers, and basic dairy sandwiches wrapped neatly in protective paper. Rather, an astonishing $12 million funneled directly through one solitary diner where a national politician gleefully toasted her political ascent. The devastating interrogator casually exited through a peripheral doorway upon the session's conclusion. He completely bypassed any broadcast conversations or massive media clusters. He staunchly refused to entertain inquiries from the waiting press pool. He simply departed the premises quietly. The physical copy detailing the culinary offerings of the corrupt venue remained resting upon the desk. Absolutely no one bothered to retrieve the damning document. Upon strolling past that specific chamber roughly 60 minutes afterward, the paper remained exactly where he left it. The solitary page rested completely flat with the text facing upward. A pair of highly distinct words crowned the header, identifying the venue perfectly. The lawmaker literally authored the statute generating this massive vulnerability. She threw a massive party inside the exact establishment, exploiting that very loophole. Yet the moment authorities inevitably demanded a coherent justification, she sprinted away. This devastating summary encompasses all the essential information required to understand the situation fully.